My son's father-in-law made him scrub toilets on his first day, in the suit he saved 3 paychecks to buy. 3 weeks later, that same man signed away his entire company, without realizing the man who bought it was me. This isn't just a story about money. It's the moment a father finally stood up for his child's dignity. Before I go on, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe, or even just tell me where you're listening from tonight. These stories I share carry pieces of my life, and somehow, speaking them out loud makes the weight feel lighter. Your support means more to me than you'll ever know. I remember that morning with a kind of softness that still settles behind my ribs. The sun wasn't fully up yet, just a pale wash of light stretching across the counters I'd repaired with my own hands years ago. The smell of bacon, coffee, and a touch too much pepper filled the kitchen. My son, Ethan, sat at the edge of the table, tapping the tip of his shoe against the floor. He kept smoothing the fabric of his shirt, adjusting his tie, trying to quiet the nerves shaking inside him. Navy blue tie, sharp, clean. A gift from his wife, Vanessa, who said he needed to look corporate now. I watched him sit there, full-grown yet somehow still carrying traces of the boy who used to grip my hand on the way to school. "You want more coffee?" I asked. He glanced at his mug, laughed nervously. "No thanks, Dad. I'm already jittery." "That's how you know you care," I told him. He smiled at the table instead of at me. A small, polite smile, the kind that tries to hide a tremble. "Carrington Properties is huge," he murmured. "I still can't believe I got in." "You didn't get in," I said, sliding eggs onto his plate. "You earned it. Every late night, every class, every hour you worked when other kids were sleeping." He nodded, but that old flicker of doubt, the one he carried since childhood, moved behind his eyes. I'd spent his whole life trying to build him up brick by brick, but some bricks sit deeper than a father can reach. I sat down across from him and lowered my voice. "Your mom would have been proud, you know." He swallowed, hard. "I wish she was here." "She is," I said, tapping my chest. "Right here." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was familiar, like an old blanket you pull close during cold mornings. We ate slowly, both pretending time wasn't moving as fast as it was. Every bite, every sip felt like we were holding on to the last moment before his life stepped into something bigger. When he finally stood to leave, he smoothed his tie again, cleared his throat, and picked up his briefcase, the second-hand one he bought because he didn't want me spending money. At the door, he stopped. "Dad?" "Yeah, son?" He let out a shaky breath. "Thanks for everything, for the shifts, the sacrifices." I put my hand on his shoulder before he could finish. "That's what fathers do," I said softly. "Now go. You'll be late." He nodded, and for just a heartbeat, he looked like the little boy who used to peek around corners before running into my arms. Then he stepped outside, got into his old sedan, and drove down the driveway, each turn of the wheels pulling him just a little further away from the safe world we'd built together. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have. There was this weight, something tight and heavy, that settled under my ribs. I tried to shake it off, but it followed me as I washed the dishes, wiped the counters, and pretended to focus on the stack of construction bids waiting on my desk. But every time I picked up a pen, my hand drifted toward my phone. 3 times I almost called him. 3 times I talked myself out of it. "He's a grown man," I said out loud, as if my own voice could quiet the unease. "He doesn't need his old man showing up on his first day." But that feeling, that knot, it wouldn't leave. By 11 a.m., the decision made itself. I grabbed a couple of sandwiches, scribbled a small note, and drove downtown. Carrington Properties looked like a place money went to feel important. Towering glass, polished stone, the kind of building that breathes cold air and confidence. I parked my dusty truck between 2 cars whose rims probably cost more than my first apartment. Inside, the lobby hummed with quiet power. A young receptionist looked up with a professional smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for my son, Ethan Hale. It's his first day." The moment she heard his name, her face changed. Not fully, just enough. A flicker, a tightening. A look that felt like pity wrapped in worry. Let me just check on that for you, Mr. Hale." Her voice wavered, and something cold settled in my stomach. Without waiting, I turned and stepped past her toward the elevators. I heard her call after me. Then I heard her whisper into her phone, tone low and urgent. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. I watched the numbers blink upward. 1, 2, 3. Each one sinking me deeper into a feeling I didn't want to name. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant. Everything was too quiet. Sleek offices, glass walls, muffled footsteps somewhere distant. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not joyful laughter. Sharp, cruel. The kind of sound that makes your stomach clench before your mind understands why. I followed it. Down a corridor, around a corner, to a half-open door. I wish I could tell you I walked away, that I respected his first day, his space, his pride. But something stronger than pride pulled me forward. I placed my hand on the door, pushed it open inch by inch. And there, in the harsh fluorescent light, I saw the moment my son's world cracked. Everything before that second was peace, and everything after, that peace was about to end. I didn't walk into that room. I drifted like my body moved ahead of my mind, pulled by something deeper than instinct. And then I saw him, my son, my Ethan, on his knees. Rubber gloves climbing past his elbows, a toilet brush in his hand. Cold tile beneath him, his brand new suit, the one he'd saved for and smiled at in the mirror, hanging on a hook like it belonged to someone else. His white shirt clung to him, soaked from sweat and nerves. His shoulders were curved inward, small in a way I had never seen on him. Not once, not in 30 years. And standing behind him was Leonard Carrington. Perfect hair, perfect suit, perfect cruelty. 2 other men flanked him, expensive watches, smug expressions, the kind of laughter that bruises a person's dignity just by being heard. They weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing at my son. This, Leonard said, pointing lazily at Ethan, is the only thing this boy knows how to do. The men chuckled louder. A pressure filled my chest, hot and cold at the same time. Not anger. Anger is sharp and quick. This was heavier, slower, a weight settling into my ribs. Then my eyes shifted and I saw her. Vanessa. My daughter-in-law. Ethan's wife. She wasn't laughing. But she wasn't stopping it. She stood with her arms folded, her polished nails tapping her elbow, her face unreadable except for the faintest curve at the corner of her lips, a look that wasn't joy, but satisfaction. A look that said she had chosen a side, and it wasn't Ethan's. Ethan looked up just then. His eyes found mine, and something inside him fractured. He didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't speak. He just stared at me with eyes that were red. Eyes that told me he had fought tears before I walked in. The kind of eyes a grown man hides when he's trying not to disappoint the person he loves most. His lips moved, barely. Don't, he mouthed. Or maybe, please. Maybe it was both. Don't see me this way. Please don't let this be real. My grip tightened around the lunch bag I'd brought. It crumpled in my hand, forgotten. Leonard turned with a sigh, as though I'd interrupted something trivial. Can I help you? He asked, irritation dripping from his voice. I stepped into the doorway. I'm Ethan's father. A smirk crawled across his face. Ah, Mr. Hale, your son is learning the business from the ground up. He gestured toward the toilet like it was comedy. A slow, deliberate laugh rippled through the room. Behind me, something steady inside me began to break. Not violently. Quietly. The way ice cracks before it shatters. Ethan, I said softly. Get up. Leonard stepped forward. He's not finished. He's my son. And he's on my company's time, Leonard snapped, his smile evaporating. My knuckles whitened. I spent 30 years doing construction. My hands know what it feels like to fight the urge to strike. And in that moment, every muscle trembled with the effort. One punch. Just one. I could see it clearly. But then Ethan shook his head, so slight it was almost a breath. Don't make it worse. I exhaled through my nose, forcing the fire back down into the pit of my stomach.
We'll talk later, son, I said.
Then I looked at Leonard. And you and I will talk too. He scoffed. I'm a busy man. You'll make time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I turned and walked out. Each step felt too heavy. Each breath too tight. When the elevator doors slid shut, the silence hit me like a blow. I rested my hands on the cool metal walls. My forehead touched the elevator mirror. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done pretending. Outside, the sun beat down on the pavement, but I felt cold. I opened my truck door, sat behind the wheel, and let the steering wheel steady my shaking hands. I took one breath, then another. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Gerald, the one man I trusted with the things I couldn't say out loud. He picked up quickly. "Robert, you okay?" "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. That scared me more. "What happened?" I looked at the building towering above me, at its smooth glass, at its hollow pride. "Gerald," I whispered, "I need information. On Leonard Carrington. Everything you can find. His company, his finances, his leverage, his vulnerabilities." Silence stretched on the line. The kind that happens when someone understands the ground has shifted. "How deep do you want me to go?" he asked quietly. I closed my eyes. "As deep," I said, "as it goes." Another pause. Then Gerald's voice, steady and loyal. "I'll start tonight." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, just a tired father with dust in his hair and a heartbreak he didn't know how to hold. I whispered something then. Not a vow, not a threat, a truth I felt down to my bones. "I will not let them break you, son." And in that moment, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rage. But something inside me went very, very quiet. The house was too quiet when I got home. Not peaceful quiet. Not the gentle stillness that follows a long day. This was a hollow quiet, like something had been scooped out of the air and replaced with an ache. I set my keys on the hook and stood in the doorway longer than I meant to. My hands were still trembling, though I tried to hide it even from myself. I walked into the kitchen and placed the lunch bag I'd carried all morning on the counter. The sandwich inside was probably warm now, untouched, pointless. I pulled out a chair and sat where Ethan had eaten breakfast just hours earlier. His coffee mug was still on the table, a faint ring left behind, still warm when I pressed my fingers to it. I traced that circle slowly, letting the small, familiar shape ground me. Ethan always rushed his morning coffee, always left rings on the table, always apologized for it afterward. I used to tease him for it. Today, I would have given anything to hear that apology. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and rubbed my face with both hands. The scene I had just witnessed replayed itself behind my eyes, sharper every time. My son, my only boy, on his knees, while grown men, wealthy, confident, proud, laughed at him. My breath hitched. I pushed myself upright and walked to the living room. I lifted the graduation photo from the mantel. Ethan in his wrinkled gown, his cap tilted too far back, his smile wide enough to outshine the sun. That smile felt like it lived in another lifetime. "You should never have been made small," I whispered to the photo. Outside, rain began tapping against the window, slow at first, then more insistent. It filled the room with a kind of rhythm, soft and steady, like a heartbeat I didn't know I needed. I sat on the couch and let the memories pull me backward. When Ethan was 8, he struck out 3 times at a Little League game. Kids laughed. One boy shoved him. He'd walked over to me with tears streaking through the dust on his cheeks. I knelt, wiped his face, and told him, "You don't quit because of small boys with smaller hearts." He'd swallowed hard, nodded, and walked back to that field with a spine straight as a fence post. That boy was still in him, somewhere, buried under shame that never belonged to him. I felt it then, the slow shift inside me, a tightening, a gathering of something steady and unyielding. Not anger, not revenge. Resolve. Hours passed before the front door opened. Soft steps, uncertain ones. Ethan walked into the living room without speaking. His shirt still smelled of cleaning chemicals. His collar was wilted. His hair was damp at the temples. He looked like someone who had spent the day being erased piece by piece. He saw me stand and looked away quickly, wiping at his face with the back of his hand. My heart cracked. "Come here, son," I said gently. He hesitated. 1 heartbeat, 2, then stepped toward me. When I opened my arms, he just folded. His forehead pressed into my shoulder as though he'd been holding himself upright for hours and finally allowed himself to fall. His breath stuttered. His hands shook. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry you saw that." I held him tighter. "You did nothing wrong." He shook harder. I tried to be strong. "I tried, Dad. But he made me feel like I didn't deserve to be there." The words splintered in my chest. We stood like that until the tremors faded. until his breathing softened, until the weight he carried wasn't crushing him quite as sharply. He finally pulled back and sat beside me, staring at his hands, turning his wedding ring slowly with his thumb. "Dad," he said quietly, Am I a disappointment?" Those words tore something deep inside me. I turned to him. "Look at me." He lifted his eyes, glassy and broken. "You are my pride," I said. "Every day, in every way." He blinked, but the sadness stayed. "Vanessa said I need to earn my place, that her father is testing me, that if I prove myself, he'll give me a real position." He swallowed hard. Maybe she's right. I felt a breath leave me, a slow, grounding breath that tasted like grief and determination mixed together. "Ethan," I said, "I want you to trust me now. Can you do that?" He frowned. "Trust you how?" "Just keep your head down for a little while. Do what they ask. Let them think you're bending." "Why?" I placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Because I'm thinking," I said quietly, very carefully. The rain intensified outside, soft, steady, rhythmic, and there, in the dim glow of the living room, surrounded by forgotten coffee mugs and old photographs, something inside me clicked into place. A path, a purpose, a plan. Some nights you don't need thunder to know a storm is coming. You just feel it settling into your bones. The next morning, long before the sun had fully stretched across the sky, I was already awake. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee cooling in my hands. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Not anymore. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry. I was focused. Ethan was still asleep down the hall. I knew the weight he carried would make waking up a battle in itself, and I knew he'd walk into that building again today, because he believed he had no other choice. But I had choices. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer. Its cover was worn soft from years of grocery lists, budgets, repairs, reminders. Today it held something entirely different. Names. Numbers. A beginning. I wrote slowly, deliberately, letting each letter anchor my thoughts. When the phone vibrated across the table, I didn't jump. I just checked the caller ID. Marcus. A man I'd trusted for 20 years. A man who saw through numbers the way most people saw through windows. "Morning," I answered. "You sounded shaken yesterday," he said. "You all right?" I exhaled. A steady, controlled breath. "I need information," I said. "On a man named Langford." A pause. "Not suspicious, concerned." "How deep?" Marcus asked. "As deep as you can go." Paper rustled on his end of the line. "That kind of digging isn't quick." "I'm not asking for quick," I said quietly. "I'm asking for thorough." Another pause, then a soft sigh. "Give me a day." I ended the call and stared at the empty notebook page in front of me. I wrote 3 words at the top: protect my son. Not punish, not embarrass, not retaliate, protect. Revenge rooted in anger blinds a man, but revenge rooted in dignity, that sharpens him. I tapped my pen against the table and let the early morning quiet settle over me. The refrigerator hummed. The pipes clicked. A bird somewhere outside let out a few soft notes, and inside, something steadied. By the time Ethan came out, rubbing his eyes, hair tousled from a restless sleep, I already had a plan forming. "You're up early," he murmured. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. He nodded like he understood too well. "You heading back today?" I asked gently. He hesitated, just long enough to hurt me. "I have to," he said. "I don't want to make things worse." I swallowed the anger that rose in my throat. "They don't get to define your worth," I said. He forced a fragile smile. "I'll be okay, Dad." But I saw it, the quiet dread behind his eyes. When he left for work, I stood by the window and watched him pull out of the driveway. I waited until his car disappeared before I sat back down and reopened my notebook. And then, I let myself think like a man who'd been underestimated his whole life. By noon, my phone buzzed again. "Marcus." "I have something," he said. "It's not pretty." I listened as he laid out the cracks in Langford's empire. Debts layered under debts, properties overstated in value, investors growing restless, banks hovering. A tower built on sand, tall, but trembling. "How long does he have?" I asked. 3 months, Marcus said. "Maybe less." I leaned back in my chair. 3 months. That was nothing. A blink, a breath. And the amount? I asked. To take control, he hesitated. 7, maybe 8 million. A younger version of me would have felt the number like a punch. But the man sitting in that kitchen, the man who had spent decades living small so his son could someday live big, felt no fear. I can cover it, I said. Silence from his end. Then, Jack, are you sure you know what you're doing? I closed my notebook. My voice came out steady, almost calm. Yes, I said. For the first time in a long time, I do. Over the next few days, the plan took shape. Not with shouting, not with threats, not with anger, with signatures, with silence, with patience, and always, always with my son in mind. I liquidated one property, then another, shifted investments I hadn't touched in years, called men who owed me favors, not many, but the right ones. I moved without haste, without hesitation, as if the universe had been waiting for me to finally decide I was done watching my son be wounded by people who mistook cruelty for leadership. By the end of the week, the scaffolding of a quiet takeover stood ready. But I wasn't rushing the final step. Timing mattered. Pride mattered. Dignity mattered. A storm only lands properly if you let the clouds gather first. And so I waited. Calm, steady, patient. Because when people underestimate you long enough, they forget something important. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. Thursday morning came with a strange kind of stillness, not peace, anticipation. I stood in the adjoining room of the hotel suite, listening through the audio feed Marcus had set up. The hum of the air conditioning, the clink of coffee cups, the muted shuffle of expensive shoes on carpet, it all blended into a low drum of tension. Then came the voice I'd been waiting for. "Gentlemen," Langford said, clearing his throat, "thank you for coming." His tone tried for confidence, but even from behind the wall, I could hear the thinness beneath it. A man trying to hold together something already slipping through his hands. My 3 representatives, men I trusted like brothers, introduced themselves with calm professionalism. They spoke of the offer, the terms, the urgency. Langford pushed back, just as we knew he would. "That number is far too low for a company of my standing," Marcus answered, voice flat. "It was your standing, Mr. Langford. Now it's debt and declining assets." Silence followed. Thick, heavy. A silence of a man realizing the room no longer bends to him. I leaned closer to the speaker. Every word mattered now. "We're prepared to move quickly," James said, "but we won't negotiate upward. 8.2 million, majority control, and you stay on as a consultant. That's the best path for you." "Consultant," Langford repeated, as if the word itself offended him. Marcus didn't soften it. "You're out of time, sir." For a moment I imagined him, jaw tight, hands clenched just beneath the table, sweat gathering at his collar, a man who'd forgotten what humility tasted like. Then came the whisper, faint but clear. "Please," he murmured to his lawyer. "What do I do?" His attorney replied, barely audible, "Sign it. The bank will take everything if you don't." I let that settle in my chest, not joy, not triumph, just inevitability. Finally, Langford exhaled a long, defeated breath. "Fine," he said. "I accept." Chairs shifted, papers slid across the table. "And before we finalize," James added, "our primary investor wishes to meet you personally." My cue. I opened the side door and stepped into the conference room. Work boots, jeans, a simple button-down shirt. Not a man pretending to be powerful, a man who built his power slowly, quietly, brick by brick. Langford looked up. Confusion flickered first, then disbelief, then fear. "You," he said, barely above a whisper, "do I know you?" "We met 3 weeks ago," I replied. "In your building." Recognition slammed into him. You're Ethan's father." "That's right." He stared, speechless, his face draining of color. "This is a joke," he said. "It has to be." "No joke," Marcus replied. "You're selling your company to him." Langford pushed his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "No. Absolutely not. I won't let. I repeated softly. "You have nothing left to let." He froze. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Calm, grounded, unhurried. 3 weeks ago, I began. I found my son on his knees, scrubbing your restroom floor while you laughed at him. He swallowed hard. I watched you break him, I continued. Piece by piece. Pride. Confidence. Worth. I was training him, he muttered. No, I said quietly. You were teaching him how small a cruel man can make someone feel. The room fell still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I didn't threaten. I simply told the truth and let it sit heavy in the air. You stripped him of dignity, I said. So today I'm taking back what you used to do it. His attorney cleared his throat. Langford, the documents are legally binding. Langford looked around the room. At the suits. At the contracts. At the walls closing in. What do you want from me? He asked, voice cracking. Sign, I replied, and walk away, and leave my son alone. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. He signed every page, some lines crooked, others barely legible. With each stroke, the man who had mocked my son shrank a little more. When the last paper was notarized, I stood. One more thing, I said. Your daughter, she needs to file for divorce. Ethan deserves better. His mouth opened in protest, then closed again. He knew he had no ground left to stand on. I stepped toward the door, stopped, looked back one final time. Oh, I added, calm as a quiet evening, and the new CEO starts Monday. Who? He croaked. My son. His breath caught. He sank slowly into his chair, a man realizing the consequences of his own arrogance. I walked out without another word, and in that silence, I finally felt free. I drove home from that meeting with a strange calm in my chest. Not triumph, not victory, just release. For weeks, I had carried the image of my son on his knees, rubber gloves up to his elbows, sweat on his collar, shame in his eyes. And now, finally, that weight loosened. When I walked through the front door, Ethan was sitting on the couch, staring at the television the way a man stares at something without seeing it. His posture was small, folded in on itself, like he'd given up space he no longer believed he deserved. Son, I said gently, get dressed. We've got somewhere to be. He looked up, confusion clouding his face. Where? You'll see. As we drove, I told him everything. Every step, every plan, every quiet move I'd made. He didn't interrupt. He didn't breathe for long stretches. He just listened, gripping the passenger seat like the world had tilted beneath him. Dad, he whispered, you spent your whole life savings for me. I shook my head. No, I spent it for your dignity. There's a difference. When we reached the building that once made him feel small, he hesitated at the doors. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not walking in as who you were, I said. You're walking in as who you are. Upstairs, when I introduced him as the new CEO, something shifted in the room and in him. Shoulders back, chin lifted, breath steady. For the first time in weeks, I saw the man I raised, not beaten down, not doubting himself, just standing tall. Later that night, after everything had settled, I sat alone in my kitchen. The lights were low, and the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I thought about the title of this story. My son's father-in-law made him scrub toilets. So I quietly bought his company. It sounded dramatic, but the truth underneath was simple. Respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait for the right moment. Wealth isn't the money in your pocket. It's the peace in your heart. It's the pride you see in your child's eyes. It's the knowledge that you stood up when it mattered. And dignity. Well, dignity is worth every penny I spent. If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments, and if stories like this speak to you, I'd be grateful if you subscribed for more.